animal, their pet.
All right. I have to get to this quote. Oh, wait, well, I'll get to that in a moment. You say that the role of the parent should not be to spare children from all suffering. Why not?
Because first of all, you can't. It would be futile to even attempt. Of course, you protect the child as much as you can, but every human being has to go through a certain amount of suffering. You cannot come to this planet and avoid suffering.
Because that's what being a human being is.
Yes.
Is that there's some discord.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is how we grow. If there were a human being that could have avoided all suffering, that human being would be totally superficial and totally identified with the external form of things, because it's suffering that drives you deeper, drives you within, where you need to find.
And by suffering, do you mean not getting what we want?
Well, that's one form of suffering, too. There are different forms of suffering. Many forms of suffering, of course, are generated by the ego itself. These are ultimately unnecessary forms of suffering.
Right.
But they are necessary for as long as you are unconscious.
And another word for suffering would be challenges or difficulties, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Challenges.
So you can't be a human being without being challenged.
No. That would be, you would miss the whole purpose for being here.
Okay.
So you need to see, even your children will not escape. They will, sooner or later, and usually sooner than later, they will encounter their form of suffering, whatever it is. You protect them as much as you can, but when you see certain things are inevitable, they may do things, unconscious behavior, they may generate their own suffering, self-generated, or it may happen to them from the outside. But no matter what, it will happen. And then rather than going into intense anguish, see, this is human suffering. And every human, you had to go through your forms of suffering. In my case, for example, my parents had very heavy pain bodies. There was constant conflict at home. And that was my constant suffering.
Pain body, that's next week.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll talk about that.
Okay. No, finish the sentence. I just wanted to say this next week.
This, of course, not only applies to children, it also applies to other people that may be close to you and going through their suffering. You do what you can to help them, whatever you can. The important thing is that you don't go into anguish yourself, because by going into anxiety and anguish yourself, you're not helping them at all.
Okay.
Because whatever state you are in transmits itself to others.
How does playing a role at work keep us from being